but I'm part of a team. All right, and Kathy, can Kathy be made co-host? Because she's got
She's sending me the slides. She's got
the
computer trouble.
slides, right?
Yeah, she's sending them to me because she said her
Okay.
computer is not feeling well today.
You want
Oh,
Kathy as the co-host?
Kathy,
No,
do you want to be No, just
no,
make me
please don't
co-host.
make me co-host, because if my computer goes out,
Oh,
then I'll
gotcha.
take everybody with me, and I don't want.
Actually, co-host, you can go in and out without dumping. It's host that dumps. But yeah, you can just, Jane, if you want to make Trish host and me co-host. Oh,
Trish, you
is
are host.
Trish, you
So
can
you would
make,
have to, yeah,
you
make
can
Kathy
make,
co-host.
yeah, you can make me host, co-host, either way. Okay, here are revised slides.
And then make sure that you're recording.
Right. Do we want to start recording yet, or do we want to wait for a little?
let's wait a little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
We're already recording.
Oh, okay.
So
All
why
right.
don't-
Well, we're fine
Oh,
then.
we are. So we
Why
are.
don't you
Okay.
stop and restart when we actually start?
Yeah. So,
And yes, I'm making you mod co-host.
okay.
And then I'm gonna hop out and get that link so you get so you can fill
To
in.
Joe.
And you guys have
Okay.
a great day.
All
Thank
right,
you,
thanks,
Jane.
Thank you.
Okay.
Did you get the slides okay, Maud?
I got the slides. I did. I have a PDF of the slides. Why did I get a PDF
You
of
should
the
have a
slides?
PowerPoint too. There should be both.
Okay, let me.
And I know we had about 12 people registered. I was thinking there were about 7 beyond the team members here. So we'll wait maybe just a couple of minutes
Sure.
to see if we gather a few more of those registrants.
Okay, and do you want to do intros while we are gathering?
That would be
We have-
great. That would be
we-
great. So Claudia, could we start with you?
Sure. I'm Claudia Dietz Rogers. I live in Colorado Springs, and I've been involved in affordable housing for many years. Started a nonprofit called Greshio Housing, which is now 33 years old. And so I've had it. Housing is in my heart, and I'm looking for more things to do now that I'm retired and not in a home, my own home, but an apartment.
Very
Super.
good. Thanks, Claudia. And I
Thank you.
see, you bet. So I don't know the first name, but be strong.
Bernice.
Bernice. All right, very good. Thank you. So Bernice, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, I've been a member of the league for many years and I have AFib and various problems. So the Zoom meetings are great for me.
Wonderful. And tell me again, Bernice, where are you from in Colorado?
Salida.
Salida. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, Jill.
Jill Armstrong. I'm with the Jeffco League and also part of our housing interest group.
Great. Thanks, Jill. Kate.
Hi, good morning. My name is Kate Van Houten. I'm a member of the LAC Housing Issues team with my cohorts who are here today. And I'll be speaking on a couple of the bills that we're going to be presenting today. I'm in Lakewood Golden, and the Jefferson County League is my home league.
Great. Thanks, Kate. All right. How about Mindy?
Good morning. I'm Mindy Moore. I'm also I'm a new member to the League of Women Voters, the Jeffco group. I live in Arvada, and like you, Claudia, I used to be a homeowner and I'm now a renter. So seeing the other side of it.
Yes, right.
Great. Thanks, Mindy. Okay, let's go to Kathy.
Hi, Kathy Smith. I'm a member of the League's LAC housing team and live in Jeffco and part of the Jeffco interest group, housing interest group.
Great, thanks, Kathy. Maud?
Hi, for all of you those acronymically challenged, LAC is Legislative Action Committee. And we're the group, the state league group that after reaching consensus on a stance on a bill, is then authorized to lobby on the bill. Kathy and Joe and Trish have lobbied, and Kate have lobbied on housing bills. And I am also in the Legislative Action Committee on revenue and fiscal issues. I'm an Arapahoe Douglas local member, and I'm on the state board as co-director for action and advocacy. So I'm here in this task force as support.
Great, thanks, Maud. Joe?
Joe Fader from the Arapahoe Douglas League, and I finally got onto this, so I'm catching up with what you all are doing.
Great, thanks, Joe. And I'm Trish Warner. I'm with the Larimer County League, and I have been a member for about 5 years up here and have been active in the housing piece of our league as well, the affordable housing, and also part of the statewide legislative action committee following the housing issues that are before us. So with that, I think we will go ahead and kick off. Amon, did you have a question? Or
I was just
comment?
gonna say, and Joe is also a member of the State Legislative Action Committee for Housing.
Yes, yes, we're a team of 4. Yeah, great. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start. Kathy prepared some slides for us to move through our meeting today. And the first one is going to be what the League's position is on housing issues, because all of our work is based on that position, and whether or not we take a stance on a bill or not goes back to that housing position. So we just wanted to start our meeting today with that position. So Maud, are you able to launch that slide?
Yeah, I'm sorry, just give me a
Let's
sec.
just maybe start from the beginning, because I had a couple of more introductory slides, Trish.
Okay, sure.
And share, and let me get it to slideshow. Okay, can you all see that?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's great. Thank you, Maud.
Perfect.
yes.
So
Yeah,
Kathy,
so
yep, all right, I'm sorry. I think we've all introduced ourselves, so everybody's familiar with who the team of people are that followed the housing bills through the legislature this year. So Kathy, I'm going to turn this slide to you.
Okay, well, I basically put this slide up for comic this is how a bill becomes a law in Colorado, and it really is very complicated. This is the legislative website. But if we go to the next slide, this is a little trimmed down way of how it works. And just wanted to give a brief overview for those of you who are new to this a little bit, that for most bills, it's not a super complicated process. All bills in Colorado receive at least one hearing, so there's not opportunity for a pocket veto in Colorado. A bill can be introduced in either the House or the Senate, and they keep the same bill number throughout the process. So in the example here, we've had it introduced into the House first, and then it has a committee hearing. And that's a point where there is testimony. And the blocks in red are where we can intervene with advocacy. So we can provide either written or in-person testimony for the committee hearings. And That may be it for a bill. It may not pass out of committee if the committee does not vote to pass it on, but it gets at least one hearing. There may be multiple committees. There's an appropriations committee if it involves anything fiscal. So there may be multiple, but ultimately it gets referred, if it keeps passing through the system, to the House floor, which you might hear referred to as the COW, or Committee of the Whole. And that's where they debate and vote on a bill. And at that point, as they're debating and voting, you can contact your representative and ask them to either support or oppose a given bill. Assuming it passes the first house or the first chamber, in this case, the House, it's then sent to the next chamber, which in this case is the Senate. And again, goes through either one or more committee hearings, again, where folks can provide testimony. And then again, it goes to the floor or the COW of the Senate. And again, that's a place where you can contact your senator and ask them to support or oppose a bill. And then if there are any changes made in the second chamber, then it has to go back and both chambers have to agree on the final version. And assuming that they do that, then it's sent to the governor for signature. And I just want to point out that in this whole process, timing is essential. Because the legislators see over 600 bills in 120 days. So until it's on their desk, they're not paying attention. So when you get an action alert from the Legislative Action Committee, it means that timing is essential, and please proceed with the action alert with whatever is being asked in a timely manner. So that's kind of how the system works. Are there any questions before we go on to the next?
I was just going to repeat that the Legislative Action Committee is the group that is authorized to act in the name of the league. And then when there is an action alert that goes to all state league members, obviously then please respond, and as Kathy said, as quickly as possible. We are all able to testify or write our representatives as individuals. But it's the LAC, the Legislative Action Committee, that does the testimony in the name of the league, for which I'm very grateful for all our members.
So there's some of that, I think, on the next slide.
Oh, I jumped ahead. I'm sorry, Kathy.
Oh, that's fine. It's not all there. But if you want to.
Whoops.
Oh.
Yes.
Yes. So, so the Legislative Action Committee, or LAC, monitors and lobbies the bills, and what we decide on as support or opposed is agreed upon by the committee, and it's based on existing league positions and principles. That's very important. And we have what's called in Colorado the Program of Study and Action, and those are our positions, our statewide positions. Some of them are based on US positions, and basically we adopt US positions, and then they're handed down to the state and then the various leagues within the state. So we are consistent as speaking with one voice, which is a very important part of the league. For housing, these are the two the two policies that or positions that we base most of our decisions on. The housing one, support policies to provide a decent home and suitable living environment for every person, which is really broad, but it does provide a basis for decisions in a lot of cases. And the other is equality of opportunity, which is equality for education, employment, and housing for all persons, regardless of their race, color, gender, religion, national origin, age, sexual orientation, or disability. So there are others, but these are the main ones that we use to make decisions as to whether to support or oppose a bill. Next. So, one before that, Maud.
Oh, sorry.
There we go. So we're gonna popcorn among the group on the various bills that we supported and go down this list. So we've got kind of two types of bills that we looked at: landlord tenant bills and also housing bills. And that'll be in a different slide. So we're just going to go through this and provide a very brief description of each of these bills. I guess we'll start with Trish, I think did 184.
Right, so yes, 184, 1099, and 1095 were the bills that I was following. And the one that I want to highlight this morning with you is House Bill 1099. It was a bill that created some strong protections for tenants when it comes to rentals. And the big goal of this one dealt with the application fees that people have to pay prospective tenants when they're looking for rentals. And this bill removes a barrier for people that are looking for housing. As you know, when you're looking for housing, you have to complete applications, and you pay a fee to file that application with a landlord, and that can run anywhere from $40 to $60. And just a side note on that, I spend some time once a week volunteering with a neighbor-to-neighbor agency here in Loveland. And we man the phones, and many of the phone calls that have been coming in deal with the fact that these rental fees have gotten so high and they have to pay them so many times across the properties that they're looking at being able to rent. So what this bill does is it allows the tenant to use a screening report that they get within 30 days of the time that they're making application for that apartment. I'm not quite clear on how that application can be obtained, but there is a route for the landlord to have been given permission to seek that screening report, or the prospective tenant can present that screening report to the landlord. The people with apartment buildings are going to have to make that clear in their advertising about vacancies, that those screening reports are acceptable in terms of a replacement for paying an application fee. And the guardrails, I think, are going to be tightened around how landlords are handling those application fees. And if they don't follow the guidelines set up around this new bill, there are fines that will be in place for them. But I think this will allow more people to use more of their funds that they have available for housing to actually secure that housing versus paying the application fees for them. The other bills, 1095, let's see, I'm going back. That was the one I was going to highlight. 1095 gives tenants, it allows them to, landlords cannot ask tenants to waive their right to a trial by jury. They have to characterize all amounts that are going to be charged for the tenant in that rental agreement. And let me just see here, the screening report and 184 is further protections for the tenants in terms of what a landlord can actually look at in the screening report. They only have to demonstrate earnings of 1.25% versus 2 times the rent or 3 times the rent, which some of these deposits are being, that's how high they're climbing for tenants to have to be able to prove that they have that amount of income. And security deposits are limited to 1 month's rent. So lots of protections for tenants and a few more guardrails for the landlords. So that was the goal of those 3 bills. So not being a politician or a lawyer, I can try to address if you have any questions, but that ends my presentation. Okay, so Kathy, who do we want to have, Joe or Kate, who wants to pop in next?
I think we want Kate last, so why don't we go with Joe next?
Okay, we'll back up to House Bill 1068. And as you can see on there, our position was to monitor this one. The way we come up with whether we're supporting or we bring it to the Legislative Action Committee as a whole and come up with why we think we should support or oppose or monitor a bill. And I came up with that we should support this bill, but once all the different members weighed in, it was left that we would only monitor this one. And basically, what this one says is limiting security deposits and rent for pet animals and excluding pet animals from personal property liens. It allows tenants to have pets in the housing, and it limits what both the pet owner and what the landlord can do. And it did pass. So and they cannot restrict the kind of pet you have according to the breed. And then the last bill that I have under landlord and tenant is House Bill 1254, which is habitability of residential premises. And this one came out of the fire up in January of last year, January of last year. And what they want is it specifies a landlord's requirements to remediate a residential premise that is damaged due to an environmental public health event, expanding what constituents retaliation by the landlord and describing situations in which a tenant may terminate a lease after the premise has been damaged due to an environmental public health event. And they say environmental public health event because it could be flooding, which might be more pertinent right now than the fires last year. But the landlord and the tenant have to agree on what is remediated to the premise to make it habitable. So that's the two bills that I had under landlord tenant.
Great. Thank you, Joe. So
Thank
Kathy?
If we can go back, I'll do a couple bills and then we'll go to Kate because she has the next slide. So I'll talk briefly about House Bill 1120, eviction protections for residential tenants. And what this bill does is it requires pre-litigation mediation between a landlord and a residential tenant before an eviction is filed, if the tenant has receives cash assistance. And the cash assistance is supplemental security income, federal Social Security disability, or the Colorado TANF program. And the tenants do not, the state basically pays the fee for the mediation for the tenants, and the landlords pay a fee for their mediation, which is usually about $75 an hour, and they usually take about 2 hours. And the other big thing that this bill does is if there is an eviction of a person with a disability, then instead of the normal 10 days to have to leave the premises, they are given 30 days. And this is because it's very difficult for folks with disabilities to find rental housing that is appropriate for their needs if they're evicted. And the problem that this particular bill was trying to address is that the Coloradans with disabilities do face unique challenges in finding housing. So mediation provides the opportunities for the parties to work together and hopefully not have the situation resort to an eviction. And it also increases the likelihood that landlords can get their unpaid rent and avoid the cost of litigation. So hopefully the mediation is a win-win. The other bill is House Bill 1186, remote participation in residential evictions. And this bill allows both parties in a residential eviction to choose how they want to intend to participate, either in person or over video conference or by phone. And this really, I think, is going to be impactful throughout the state. Since COVID, various courts have handled in-person versus remote participation differently, and this sets state standards for this, and also provides for defendants to file answers for an eviction electronically, and either party to file other documents electronically. And the problem is that, you know, renters often don't appear for their eviction court proceedings. And if they don't appear, then a default judgment is automatically entered against them, and the renter is evicted without a hearing. And, you know, folks who have jobs and children and transportation issues, especially in rural areas where the courthouses can be miles and miles away from where folks live, really face barriers in being able to show up for their court appearances. And there was this was instituted in Arizona, and they went from 40% of default judgments to 13% in a year by allowing folks statewide to participate remotely. So I think it could be very impactful. And it's since a lot of the infrastructure has been done, the fiscal note is about $400,000 appropriated to the judicial department, and a lot of the courts have already instituted a lot of the infrastructure changes. So I'm going to turn it now over to Kate. She's going to talk about the last couple of bills.
Okay. Well, sadly, these were very contested bills, and they both lost. One lost in committee and one lost on the calendar. It was not heard before the session ended at midnight on the 8th.
Next slide, Maud.
So go ahead, Maud, to the next slide, please. Anyway, I'm covering House Bill 231115, which was simply a request to remove the statewide prohibition against rent control. Thus, it would enable local governments to be able to enact rent controls should they choose to. There was no fiscal note for this, but there was intense opposition. It was probably the only bill that is a statewide regulation that has been really rejected. And it's unfortunate because rent control is kind of necessary in certain communities because of the predatory practices of the large equity firms that are buying housing complexes that are mostly apartments, and making things unaffordable for just regular folks, and increasing the amount of homelessness that we have, especially in more densely urban areas in the state.
Are we seeing the right slide?
No, it's the next slide. Maud might be otherwise occupied right at the moment, but
So, Kate, sorry, I thought you were talking about 1115.
yeah, it's on the next slide.
That's the slide I'm showing.
Yeah, the next
I'm seeing.
slide, please.
Oh, you have more on. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
No worries. So it was also paired with Senate Bill 231171 in order to, if 1115 had been able to successfully make it to the governor's desk and be signed by the governor, which was an issue this year. This 1171 bill was kind of paired up with it because in order to prevent, again, predatory landlord practices, you have to have just cause for eviction. Otherwise, people would just evict people. If there was rent control in an area, a local municipality decided to have it, people could, landlords could easily, under the current paradigm, could easily evict people to increase the rent that was set by the rent control at the time that the rent control came into being. It had a fair amount of stakeholding, and it was very well amended so that landlords had good guardrails, but also good protections against deadbeat tenants. And it also had really good protections for tenants so that they would not be unjustly evicted from their premises. And this would cover all tenants of residential property, whether it's a house or an apartment or what have you. And the just cause portion of it was if the rental contract, the rental agreement was breached for certain conditions, particularly non-payment of rent, but also destruction of property and so forth. The landlord did have recourse to have an eviction process that was then set by statute. There was also a no-fault eviction available for landlords in case they wanted to occupy a unit by themselves or by a family member, or if they needed to do some renovations that caused them to need to have the unit vacated. There were provisions for notice to the tenant and that were not onerous, and it was heavily, like I said, heavily stakeholdered, and the time frames for all of this was massaged quite a bit, and it was very reasonable for both landlords and tenants. The third thing that it provided for was for a notice to quit for tenants. If they wanted to leave their lease, it gave them a 60-day notice to quit. And sadly, this one did not pass through the Senate Committee on Transportation, Housing, and Local Government until very late in the session, near the end of the last full week of the session. And it did pass and went to the Committee of the Whole, but it fell off the calendar past when the session ended on May 8th. Anybody have any questions about those two bills?
I'm just curious what happens to the bill that that got introduced but didn't get looked at. The one
Well, they both were looked at very, very strongly. But in one instance, in House Bill 1115, it was postponed indefinitely in anticipation of a veto by the governor, I believe.
Okay.
And it did make it to the Senate, and it was making it through all the hearing process. It had made it through the House because it was a House bill, and it did get referred to the Senate, but it didn't make it out. It didn't survive out of there. And 1171 had made it through the House and had all of its amendments. And then it made it through the committee in the Senate and was supposed to have its second special order, second reading is what it was called, time for testimony and debate. And it never got a hearing at that level before the session ended. There is no special session being called for by any of the leaders. So what usually happens, I think, and Kathy, you know more about this than I do, is that this gives us an opportunity to go back to the table and try again in another year, hopefully next year.
Okay.
More stakeholding needs to be done in order to get a number of people on board. But we really want to emphasize on 1115, for instance, that it was a local control of rents enabling bill. And it really was very simple. There was very little language to it. It was just removing a prohibition. There was no fiscal impact. And communities and municipalities did not have to enact rent control locally. They just had the ability to do it if they chose.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay. On to the next slide then.
The slide?
Yep.
Okay.
You want to start, Kate, since you're on?
Oh, okay. Yes, I got the really important one. Whatever Senate bill is number one in the session, it's usually very important to the president of the Senate and the leaders. So this one was both of the Senate Bill 1 and Senate Bill 35 were mostly administrative in origin, in nature rather. And there was a there's an authority of public-private collaboration unit for housing, which mainly was giving an authority to a unit under the Division of Housing, and actually it's under personnel. It's a very administrative thing, but it enables public-private partnerships to be able to be contract negotiated through the state through this authority. And it gives more opportunity for the state to develop property in coordination with private entities. This is it's known as P3 for public-private partnerships. And this is a really valuable way for development to occur. It's going to probably be the future of development for affordable housing in Colorado, but it is a real crucial bedrock, and it did pass, so I was grateful for that. I would have been shocked if it hadn't passed because it is Senate Bill 1. Senate Bill 35 was really administrative in its nature. The authority for the Middle Income Housing Authority Act, that was already established in a previous session, so it's already enacted by statute. But they found that there were some gaps in the procedures and the abilities for this unit, what they call a special authority, to be able to do contract negotiations again, and as well as to have additional directors be placed on the board that manages this authority. But this is one of the attempts to really develop and make available what's called middle housing. It's not low income housing. It's not strictly affordable housing, but it's for housing for people of middle income designations, which we know our nurses and our fire people and professionals in all different careers and teachers are technically in that middle income, but they may not be able to afford a lot of the housing that's out there because of what's going on in Colorado. Any questions on those two?
So Kate, another word for term for those sort of cleanup bills like SB 35 is a housekeeping bill.
Ah, thank you.
Joe, do you want to do your bills?
Oh,
Okay,
Joe,
well,
maybe, yeah.
yeah, I'll jump in and hopefully Joe will be able to do hers later. So I wanted to talk about a couple of bills. The land use bill, which I have a slide later, so I won't go much into it. That's Senate Bill 213. It basically lost on the last day of the session. They weren't able to come to an agreement on it. Probably saw a lot of it in the press. But basically what the introduced bill did was to try to establish a statewide framework for assessing and planning for statewide housing needs and for adopting smart growth policies statewide. So a little bit more about that later, but I'll move on to House Bill 1190, Affordable Housing Right of First Refusal. And what this bill does is it allows local governments to be able to be competitive with for-profit developers within their jurisdiction to purchase multifamily residential and mixed-use rental properties that go up for sale in order to either preserve or create affordable housing. And this turned out to be a very controversial bill. And it basically goes after the problem that, especially for extremely low income renter households, there are only like 29 affordable and available rental homes for 100 households of extremely low income folks. And at least half of Colorado renters are housing cost burdened. And the waiting list for housing vouchers is 3+, could be even 10 years. So Colorado is losing existing naturally occurring affordable housing. And one of the biggest issues is that out-of-state and multi-state investors are purchasing properties and then redoing them, increasing the rents greatly and displacing current residents. So it's very important for us to preserve our existing affordable housing, and this is a tool to do that local governments can use. It was trimmed down a lot, and there were restrictions as far as how many units applied, and it was given a sunset of 5 years. So I can go into more detail if anybody has specific questions about that, but I'll move on to House Bill 1255, regulating local housing growth restrictions. And this bill prohibits a local government from enforcing or enacting any local housing growth restriction. Currently, Boulder, Golden, and Lakewood have such restrictions in place, and this basically, and this bill passed, so it does preempt them. In the event of a declared disaster, the local government can have a temporary growth restriction for no more than 1 year. And the problem that this is addressing is that when one community restricts growth, the housing burden falls on neighboring communities. And really with our housing issues and shortages and affordability, it's a statewide issue. So people can't afford to live where they work. Neighboring communities take a lot of the heavy lift, and there's more driving because folks can't afford to live where they work. So this does not mean that that local governments have to approve any specific developments. They just need to be able to give a project a fair hearing based on their local needs and merits and zoning rules. So is Joe back? You out there, Joe?
Have to unmute.
Yeah. So do you want to cover your bills before I go on to the next slides?
Right, I'm gonna talk about the low-income housing property tax exemption first. And in this, it creates a new property tax exemption for community land trusts and other nonprofit affordable homeownership providers that develops a permanent affordable for sale on the land which is owned by the trust or the nonprofit affordable homeownership provider. So although the land is tax exempt, the homes which will be sold to low income families will continue to be taxed. So it's just a way of making it more affordable to develop the low income housing. And then the other bill is Colorado Fostering Success Voucher Program. And this bill establishes the Colorado Fostering Success Voucher Program in the Department of Human Services. And the purpose of this program is to provide housing vouchers and case management services to eligible youth. Once a youth leaves the fostering program, and they have to be under the age of 21, it will develop a joint administration and implementation plan to help them become solid citizens and they won't be left out on the street, which happens so often if they don't have a family to go back to. And the only problem with that program is it is a voucher program, and as Kathy had mentioned, there's many more people looking to use vouchers than there are voucher programs available. But that's the two that I was following. At least they both passed.
Okay, thank you, Joe. And the other one I wanted to talk about is House Bill 1304. And Maud, if you could go on to the next slide about House Bill 1304. This is a cleanup bill or a housekeeping bill for Proposition 123. And if you'll recall, Proposition 123 was on last November's ballot, and the state passed it to take some of our income and at the state level and use it to fund affordable housing statewide. So that's actually in the process. And as an aside, it just opened up that local governments can start applying to commit to be able to get into this program to be able to get the Proposition 123 funding. So please encourage your local governments to do what's necessary. The deadline's November 1st. Money should be available sometime in July. So it's happening in real time. And is, as in most ballot initiatives and legislation, there was some cleanup that needed to be done. And so there were several technical changes, a few of which are listed here. They neglected to list tribal governments in the original ballot issue as being able to participate in getting Proposition 123 funding. It also increases the flexibility for local governments to partner in meeting. There's a requirement for a 3% annual growth target over 3 years for affordable housing in a jurisdiction. And this increases flexibility. So, for example, a county and a city can partner together and both benefit from the units that are made. And it also requires annual reports to the legislature about what programs have been funded and the geographic distribution of the funding statewide. And there were several other small technical changes, but The our housing group decided to take a monitor instead of a support position on this particular bill, because one thing that it added that the ballot initiative did not have is a petition process specifically for rural resort communities. And what it does is it allows higher area median incomes, which is the basis of a lot of decisions of what defines affordability, specifically for rural resort communities. Some things that were added on to that to make it a little stronger were that these petitions need to be based on demonstrated needs through housing needs assessment, and the petitions will be reviewed by the Division of Housing. Things move pretty fast, so we just maintained our monitor position on this bill, but I wanted to explain why it wasn't just kind of since we're in support of Proposition 123 and getting affordable housing funding around the state, why we took a monitor position. And then I also wanted to further explain Senate Bill 123. Maud, if you could go to the next slide. This was the land use bill that died the last day of the session and received a lot of press. And I wanted to explain the positions that we kind of talked about at the beginning of this presentation too, about why the League supported this bill. And in addition to the housing positions, and there are some deeper down housing positions that were made, this also spans transportation and climate and land use and local governments. So we had consensus from folks from all those different issue groups looking at this. So in addition to the housing, responsible land use planning by all levels of government, regional and metropolitan planning to prevent haphazard urban growth, which basically is sprawl, zoning practices and procedures that counteract racial and economic isolation, housing in low and moderate income families as a part of all planned neighborhoods or communities, policies that prevent segregation of lower income families in large developments or neighborhoods, and energy efficient and environmentally sound transportation systems that afford better access to housing and jobs and reduce pollution from mobile sources, which is basically people driving too much. So just wanted to offer that explanation as further explanation about why the League supported this Senate Bill 213. And I think that's the end of our presentation, sorry, about bills. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the presentation?
Are any of these slides available online that they can be copied? Not to be used, I should say.
The Housing Task Force has a webpage on the
Okay.
League site. I assume that these slides will be made available on that and the recording as well on the webpage.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
We
Yes,
can, if it's okay, Trish, we can send out the link once it's up. Is that
right.
okay?
Yes, we can. And I think, Maud, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Jane is able to, if we send those slides her way, then she's able to load them up onto that web page. Am I correct in thinking that?
She is, and for like LAC training, if we're sending out our slides, we do them as a PDF. And you can, it's easy to save a PowerPoint or a Google slide deck out as a PDF.
I sent you both the PDF version as well as the PowerPoint, so you should have that already.
So you can just forward the PDF to Jay. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, thank you all.
Welcome, Claudia. You bet. All right, so if we look at our agenda, I think if we go, okay, so here we got,
Okay, my apologies, I forgot, because in anticipation of this being online, I stuck on a couple of slides with some statewide resources about affordable housing. So these are for state organizations and specifically about Proposition 123. And then Maud, if you go to the next slide, these are some recent reports and data resources and that might be of interest to folks who are interested in housing. And then the last slide is what I think Trish wanted to go on to discuss with the group.
perfect. Thank you, Kathy, for listing those resources. Those will be helpful for people to be able to access on our website as well. So that's great. Thank you.
So Kathy, when you created the PDF, did you have live links in there?
Yes, they should have live links.
Great, thank you.
All right, so yes, next on our agenda, we kind of wanted to come back and take a look at our housing task force has been in existence for about a year. And as you recall, the State League has developed a number of issue-related task forces. And the Housing Task Force in particular has the purpose to inform and engage members across the state to promote collective actions around housing issues as they strongly align with the stated league position that we reviewed earlier. So I'm not going to finish reading off of that, but you can see down below the ways that the Housing Task Force has been working in terms of coordinating with local leagues and other organizations. We've organized webinars, workshops, and presentations at our monthly meetings. We promote justice and equity through advocacy at all levels and closely align our work with the Legislative Action Committee. So our goal this morning in bringing this forward is to kind of look back at how this year has gone and what changes we might be able to make or the suggestions you would have for, and I'm particularly zeroing in on the informing and engaging members across the state. So just open that up for discussion. Our task force numbers have run in terms of our meeting attendance, have run from like say 8 or 10 all the way up to 38 to 42. So we've had a wide range of numbers attending our meetings. So we'd just like to open that up for discussion. If any of you have any ideas of things we could do differently to promote the Housing Task Force or other ideas you would have around this issue, we'd appreciate a little discussion if we could.
Trish, do you want me to stop sharing?
Oh, sure. Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
And I know we're a small group today. We maybe will develop something that we can send out in writing to all of the members of the task force that we've had at one point or another for their ideas as well. But if you have any ideas to share this morning, that would be great. Or if things come to mind in the next week or so that you could send our way. We just want to make sure that we remain a vibrant task force around our goal.
It might be a good idea if we contacted all the different local leagues, contacted each local league individually and said, you know, this is our goal and how can we get you involved in the Colorado Housing Task Force, since we want to coordinate across all of the state.
Yes, great. Thank you, Joe. Yes, and we know housing is an issue across the state. It's not just in one particular area. So Mindy, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, this is sort of a tangential issue, not so much dependent upon specifically getting the word out to league members, but has the league considered perhaps, you know, a statewide position paper or an op-ed in a journal like the Colorado Sun, urging our governor and our state leaders to do some of the work that was notably pointed out when 213 did not move forward, that there wasn't enough coordination with local governments, there wasn't enough discussion across the state preparing for some of these issues. I think Senator Kirkmeyer, others have talked about, why don't you have summits like Governor Romer did, you know, years ago across the state to get more local government buy-in for land use reforms in case, so that they could try another version of 213 next year ahead of that.
Maud,
Yeah, good, excellent question. Some of us had a meeting, Kathy was in on that with, I believe, with someone from the governor's office shortly after session ended, and he was still like this on 213 dying, about, okay, how do we do this next year? And I think he said there were well over 200 meetings with local government folks before last session. So there was a lot of local government outreach. That said, they would like a platform. They would like to be able to speak to a large number of league members. Now, how we gather a large number of league members into an audience for someone from the governor's office or even the governor himself, I don't know. But yes, op-eds are a possibility as well, and I think they would be happy to help us in the governor's office to help us with material. Does that?
Kathy, do you have any reaction or response to Mindy's suggestion there too?
Yeah, I've started working on something. The Legislative Action Committee has a webpage on the state website. And I've started trying to work on an article because I think there needs to be a follow-up article that does state the positions that we used to support the bill. And also to, I think, express what you just asked about, encouraging the governor and local governments and regions to try to get some more communication going across the state as to what can be done and how this can be organized. I think there were some very good, there was a very good framework in that bill to try to get some organizing done. And there's really not a whole lot of reasons, except maybe financial reasons, why this couldn't start now. I don't think it needed to be legislated. So I'm gonna need some help with people like Maud and our lobbyist, Andrea, to find out what the details are around these suggestions and what the pros and cons are of putting them forward. But I would like the league to really push the state to communicate towards better communication on these issues instead of just this loggerheads approach.
And there are certainly some very dug in heels at the local level of, don't take away my local control. I had a conversation with my local mayor of Centennial, who I didn't suggest a rabies shot after our conversation, but she was adamantly opposed to this bill, and Centennial sent out at least 3 action alerts to their entire email list, and then a yay, we killed the Wicked Witch of the West email after the bill died. So convincing local officials that they should give up some power is going to be an uphill battle. Now, they did it in Oregon this last session. They did some, and maybe one of the things we need to do is contact the Oregon League and say, how did that happen?
Well, I think the other
Yeah.
thing we need to do is to keep our local governments accountable to do this work. And Proposition 123 provides at least some funding for them as a tool to do it. So we really, I think, need to push beyond the status quo.
Yeah, good point. Jill?
Well, one of the sticking points to me that I keep hearing is the amount of land that's zoned single family and the resistance of the majority of people who live in a single family home to have any other kind of housing, be it multifamily, whatever. And I wonder if there's any kind of education we can do. I mean, single family zoning really has its roots in racism. I don't know if there's any general kind of thing that we could develop, just kind of explaining single family housing. And then if we can find, I know, for example, Minnesota or Minneapolis specifically has eliminated single family zoning. And you were talking about Oregon, it might be really interesting to learn more about that process and see if there's anything we could replicate here in Colorado. But I know that you know, density seems to be a huge issue, and there's so many other myths around what happens when we try and build denser, and you know, the tone of the neighborhood or what it looks like. And so I just feel like there's a whole lot of education that needs to go on.
Yeah, good point. And that Jill, maybe give us some launching space for looking at next year's programs and meetings and things that we can bring forward, because that was, yeah, that light bulb just went on, because that would definitely give us some direction to go next year with your suggestions. So that's great. Maude?
Two things. One is Oregon might have been a slightly easier lift because Portland several years ago got rid of single family house zoning citywide. I think it went R3, I mean R4, that there could be 4 units on any single family lot. So Portland had already gone there, and so that might have been made it an easier lift. I know that most of our local leagues have presentations about once a month. They call them programs or civic eds or whatever it's called in that local league. And there are 19 local leagues. It's a lot of work to get to do presentations or talks to all of them. But that might be the way to actually get a lot of get more participation than even 35. How many people did we have when we had Luke come and talk about 213?
Yeah, I wouldn't say for sure, Maude, but we've had upwards of 42 people in attendance at the meeting, so I can't go back and
Let
We
me,
didn't have very many, but that was one of our instances where we messed up the link. So I'm not
Yeah.
sure
Oh.
that's indicative of
Yeah.
it.
ouch.
So, you know, as
Okay.
far as the local leagues getting this information, or sorry, my clock is dinging in the background. If local leagues are aware of the meetings that are being held at our level, those meetings are open. I think it's just a matter of getting the message to all the local leagues about those meetings. So I've written down that whole idea of making contact, as Joe suggested, with the individually to the local leagues. I know there was a time when, as a Larimer County person involved in housing, I did send a contact out, and many of our leagues don't necessarily have a housing contact person. They may not have a housing issue team. So then
Yeah.
it's kind of falls back on whoever the leader of that league is to filter that message out to everybody about that meeting. So we'll work
Mhm.
on getting our meetings better out there for everyone as well. But those are all great ideas. I thank you for those. They'll help guide our planning for next year. So if any other ideas or discussion on the purpose and the movement of our task force. The other thing kind of in connection to that is, and it was alluded to earlier, is our webpage, the Housing Task Force webpage. That was put together at the state level when the whole task force idea was developed, but we feel there needs to be some redesign, reconfiguring that webpage. So again, ideas from you about what might be important to have on that webpage. Right now, it's got our position, the goal of our group. We had a couple of articles written, but they were put in there with a one-liner and then a live link to get to that. So we're just wondering, what else can we do to put our housing information more front and forward out there?
Are the presentations on that page?
Maud, I can't look at that screen at the same time, but I believe the links to our meetings and speakers are on that page. Am I right?
So there's
Yeah,
a,
I think they ought to be highlighted more.
yeah, it says
Okay.
to watch our latest meeting, click here. And then there's an article on 123.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Yeah, and so, so here are past ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
the article about 123 is very dated, so we need to really do some updating.
Updating, yes.
yeah, actually, Kathy, I'm thinking the one that you're writing for the Legislative Action Committee page, you could also put here.
The summary of the bills, yes, the housing bills.
No, I wasn't thinking the summary of the housing bills. What on that, you might want to just link to the report on the Legislative Action Committee page. The Colorado Capital Watch report.
Mhm.
This one.
Well,
Housing.
I'd kind of like to see housing info on the housing page. I mean, I don't want to send people looking.
Yeah, you could put those summary slides on. But I was thinking also Kathy's 213 article. So,
Okay.
but
Kate.
just suggestions, just,
Sure.
it's
Yep,
your
no,
page.
thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Kate?
Yeah, the slides and the live links for the statewide resources and the recent reports and data resources is really valuable to have front and center and very prominently featured in a sidebar of some sort, or I'm not sure how the design elements would work because that's not my thing. But these two slides with these live links are just incredibly valuable.
Okay, great. Any other ideas? So who works with and that's a discussion we can have offline, but Maud, we need to know who works with the design of these pages so that we've got somebody to work with.
I think that Jane is the person who does the actual populating. If you
Okay.
need a serious redesign, that would be Katina, who is, but she's part-time communication, but also very much development, which is sorely needed. Let me put in a plug for the Leader of Democracy event, June 3rd. For those of you who can make it to Denver, or it's also hybrid. We're honoring Jason Crow for his courage and defense of democracy on January 6th, and afterwards have a number of other speakers. And for those who can go in person, will have the run of History Colorado for the evening, and munchies and beverages. But Katina, so if you need a serious redesign,
Right.
that would be Katina. If you just want, if you kind of know where you want things and you just, can you move this here? Can you do this? That I think is Jane.
Okay, so we'll work with those two. Thank you for those.
Yeah, but Katina, I think Katina is focusing on that and applying for grants.
Okay.
So, and Kate had her hand up.
Oh, no.
Right.
No, no,
we-
no.
We went
Kate
to
left her
yep.
hand up.
She didn't get her hand down. All
Okay,
right, great. All right, so those are some good ideas for our webpage, and we'll work on that this summer to get that updated. And then the next thing I have is in June, we're working to get at least 3 legislators that have had some involvement in the housing area and work in the legislature this session to come and talk to us not only about the housing bills, but also talk to us about how, as league members, we get things rolling sooner. What is our best way of communicating with legislators? So we want to kind of get their inside track info to the Housing Task Force, so that, as Kathy says, we're not waiting until things start to happen. We can help some of that start sooner. So that
And I
will be
think-
the June meeting, and we'll put who those people are on the calendar once we get them secured. But we're working to get 3 people, and the 3 that we're looking at right now are Meg Froelich, Andrew Basenecker, and Barbara Kirkmeyer. So those are our first 3. And then we have a list of 4 or 5 more that if they say no, we've got some other bench players that we'll bring in. So that's June. And then in July, we've secured Kathy Alderman with the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless to come and be part of our conversation in July. So that'll be a great meeting. I'm sure all of you have heard her before, but she'll be a very dynamic part of our group. And then we're not meeting at all in August. We feel there needs to be a bit of a break and we need to regroup. And then we'll put forward our schedule for next year, hopefully 3 to 4 months out, so people can plan and know what's coming versus just doing a month to month trying to bring things on board. So you've given us some good direction today, so I think that'll be very helpful to us in engaging speakers. And if you have someone in your community or in your network that you think would be very beneficial for our group to hear from, and of course, knowing that they align with our league position, please send their names my way. That'd be great. And so otherwise, if anybody else has anything else to bring forward, Kathy?
We should probably advertise the LAC overview that Andrea's doing.
Thank you, Kathy. May 24th at 5:30. It obviously is not going to go as deeply into housing as this did, but it will cover the full spectrum of what LAC covered, and Andrea does a great job of summarizing the session. Thank you for the reminder, Kathy.
Yes, great.
And
I'll-
that's also a register. Oh, I'm sorry, a register
ahead.
on the state through the state calendar.
And I don't have the names of the speakers, but I'll just put a plug in for Wednesday night. The Larimer County League is hosting a meeting on special districts, metro districts, and some of the LAC statewide members are involved in the panel that's presenting that. So that is probably on the state calendar, but if not, it's for sure on the Larimer County calendar. It's a Zoom meeting. No, Maud?
I'm pretty sure it is on the state calendar, as is Arapahoe Douglas, which is having someone else speak about metro districts.
That's a hot topic.
Well, I think some folks thought that it was all going to be one meeting, and we just it's worked out.
Okay.
But I think Fair Rusnick, whatever her last name is, and maybe John Henderson, and maybe Jeff Withers are going to, and maybe Christina Matthews
Yes.
are going to be speaking at the Larimer meeting, and then Brian Matisse is speaking at the Arapahoe Douglas meeting, and anybody can join either of those meetings on
Right, and
Metro
they'll be
District.
recorded as well, and the recording's available for people too, so.
Yeah,
to-
when Brian was contacted, because it was the same night, the same time, he thought it was all one meeting. And overcommitted himself there.
We believe it's sorted out. And Trish, if you need help getting some of those legislators, ping me. I don't know if Joe has bandwidth to ping Meg Froelich if that's her rep. Joe is.
Yeah, she's not my rep. She's just
Oh,
a
okay.
local league member. But
Right.
someone I know.
Okay,
So
so
Maude, Beth offered a couple of months back
to do
to
that,
engage speakers, so I'm really asking Beth
to do
to
it,
make those
okay,
connections for us. Yeah,
okay. And Kate, I see your physical hand. If you want to get your virtual hand down, go back to reactions, and it will show you lower hand. It will show you the
Okay.
option to lower hand. But
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
And I have to go because I have a new member orientation at 2:00, so,
perfect. Yes,
Thank
thank you,
you,
Joe,
Joe.
for coming.
okay.
And unless anyone else has any other questions or comments,
Kate,
we are
I
at our
think-
ending point.
I
Kate?
think Kate had one.
Yeah, I do have one. I wanted to mention to Claudia and to anybody else that is unfamiliar with LAC, we're always looking for new members on our LAC housing issues team for the next round of legislation in 2004. So if you have any interest, feel free to talk to Maude and others offline. Kathy, Trish, or I would be happy to talk to you, but we could sure use some extra hands.
Yeah.
Thank
Eyeballs.
you. Thank you. This
Yeah,
has
we're-
been very informative.
Yeah, and one addendum to Kate, we had immense recruiting before this last session, and out of our 40 members, 20 were new.
Yeah,
And it was wonderful new energy and a huge amount of training, mentoring, and coaching for those of the three of us helping coordinate the Legislative Action Committee. So we have the main people who were recruiting, we said, let's just let that group sit and the new members be now sophomores, and not that we're barring the door to anybody, but we're not doing we're not doing a lot of recruiting. We're mostly staying with the group that we have, but I'm sure there will be a few new members, and just as there always are. We just had a very large recruiting effort one year, and it was had many pluses and a few minuses. And Claudia, you said you were involved in creating affordable housing through that nonprofit.
I don't know if you've heard of Greccio Housing, GRECCIO. It's a nonprofit that started 33 years ago and does permanent affordable rental housing for people with low incomes. And it also provides and has since the beginning supportive services. So there are many services that the residents can take advantage of. There's a whole part of the team that is involved in that, including Greccio developed in, at least on the affordable housing side, eviction prevention programs that Greccio has, and its leadership still amazes me. I'm a cheerleader for them because of what they've done, and they're waiting. They have about, I think is it 800 some apartments throughout the city.
Wow.
And are doing new construction. I live in a new building that was for seniors. It's the first one they developed. from some land that the city was donated. And they're going to be, for the second time trying for the CHAFA tax credits for another one that will be 70 some units for seniors. And they also partner with Partners in Housing and the Rocky Mountain Community Land Trust. There's an area in town that had townhouses that never got completed. And they now have the money for completing 162 new townhouse units for affordable housing and for veterans.
Wow.
So, you know, it started small. We never had any idea that it would grow the way it is. There's only been 3 of us executive directors in 33 years. So there's a lot of dedication and a lot of community involvement. And the waiting list that has to be renewed every month is 1,600 people.
Yeah.
And those are people who have to call in every month. So it isn't just sign in once and we'll see when your name comes up. But I know it's all over.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's a passion for me, and anything we can do is helpful. And I've never gotten involved in terms of the legislative, but I've been impressed by the League of Women Voters over the years. And in looking at what can I do now, or what would I like to get into, and League of Women Voters came into my head. So I'm pleased, and I look forward to meeting folks in person, because you all sound so interesting.
Great. Great.
Super.
Thanks, Claudia. Yes, I'm
You-
going to do a little work on that group. I've never heard them before.
Yeah, it's GRECCIO. GRECCIO. I
Right.
was actually a Franciscan sister for 31 years and helped Bishop Hannafin establish some senior affordable housing, Villa San Jose and Santa Maria. And then at that point, I had to make a decision whether I had the energy or was called to do housing or do more with the religious order. And it took me 3 years to decide that I was supposed to see about more housing. And that's kind of what I've done.
Great story. Thanks for
Wow.
sharing. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
That's
you're
Great.
welcome.
Thank you for your good work, and
Yeah.
we'd love
Yes.
to have you part of the group.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. I
Yeah,
look forward
thank
to
you.
it. Okay,
Thank you
Claudia,
for joining.
what is your last name, Claudia? I'm sorry.
it's a double last name. DEATS Rogers, RODGERS.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
You're
All
welcome.
right. Well, if no one else has anything else, I think we will say goodbye for today.
Goodbye.
All right. Great. Thanks, everyone. We'll be in
Thank
touch.
you.
We'll be in
Take care,
touch.
everyone. Bye-bye.
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 Thank you all.